South Park, in my estimation, did for Disney this week what many years ago they did for Scientology. They flipped the narrative in a way that I think Disney will never recover from. So they did what is supposed to be the first part of a trilogy into the Panderverse, in which Cartman is having nightmares about him and all of the South Park crew being replaced by diverse women who hate the patriarchy. So I did watch this, but first I put together a trailer of it. And then I will discuss the episode a bit.
I had explosive diarrhea all night.
Damn.
Dude, school is going to be so awesome today.
Butters.
Oh, hamburgers.
Oh my God, they killed Kenny.
I like big boobs.
How does this even make any sense?
It makes perfect sense. I think the problem is you.
Tammy Mullins has sweet knockers.
You sound like a white male trying to reestablish the patriarchy.
Mom, I had a dream that I was replaced by a diverse woman. They were taking all my favorite people and replacing them with diverse women complaining about the patriarchy. Will you check under the bed and make sure there's no Disney executives under there?
Kathleen Kennedy is not under your bed. And no such thing as Disney executives who replace everyone you love with diverse women who complain about the patriarchy.
Okay, so I did watch the episode, and it was clever, and it was not just, everybody tuned into it, and all the conservatives are taking the clips from it that attack what Disney has become, which is, like a caricature of a woke, diverse take on these characters, where they're trying to replace everybody with a diverse woman who complains about the patriarchy, Indiana Jones and the MCU and so on. But it was smarter than that, as you would expect from South Park. There's actually a B plot on the show where AI is knocking all the professional class people out of their jobs. And at the same time, nobody knows how to do shit is kind of a running refrain. So the handymen are getting very rich because nobody can fix an oven door or anything. And eventually it winds up being this whole commentary on our economy. The handymen get rich and all the PMCs are thrown out of work. And there's one brilliant scene where they're sitting around a bar talking about, Randy saying, we thought if we let the handymen take care of everything, they would take care of us. We didn't realize they would just take that money and go to space. So you have like the two main handymen are competing to see who gets to space first. But then they are told it's all Kathleen Kennedy's fault. So there is a commentary there on how a lot of people whose problems and issues are really economic get caught up in these aimless culture war battles about, Black Spider-Man, because they can't really wrap their heads around the way the economy is actually destroying their lives. It's not Kathleen Kennedy destroying your lives, although she's probably destroying your childhood. So the effect of this, just like I believe Scientology was never able to recover from that South Park episode where they actually laid out what Scientologists believe, because there were people like Tony Ortega at the Village Voice who had been talking about this for years, but most people didn't realize what Scientology was until that episode, and it turned the whole thing into a laughing stock. I think it's much harder for them to recruit ever since that episode came out. So Disney supposedly had meetings with Paramount. Their lawyers met with Paramount lawyers trying to put pressure on them not to air this or to make changes to this episode. But it seems they finally threw up their hands and canceled a movie that seems to have drawn all of the lightning of every issue that people have about Disney now. I would attribute this to the South Park episode. So finally, Disney delayed Snow White and Elio, that's a Pixar film, for a year, and they removed Jonathan Majors' Magazine Dreams from the calendar for obvious reasons. We can go to the next one. Disney on Friday, the same day that this dropped, by the way, announced it is delaying the release of its live-action Snow White movie starring Rachel Zegler by a year from March 22nd, 2024 to March 21st, 2025. The film, which is officially titled Disney Snow White, is among the studio's biggest offerings of the year and is one of the anchors of its spring slate. All right, so this movie is ending up just being potentially a financial and definitely a PR disaster for Disney, partly because their leading actress has been running around for a couple of years talking about how much she hates everything about
She's my favorite actor.
Snow
Leave
White.
her alone. I'm going to have to call the theater and get my money back because I pre-bought these tickets already for opening night.
She very much, I mean, she's kind of the perfect symbol of what Disney has become. She's like this caricature of an empty-headed, obnoxious, narcissistic, woke actress running around talking about how terrible the movie that she's in, how terrible the movie that it's based on is. So that drew a lot of fire. But you know what? Nobody was paying much attention to her until this photo dropped. Nobody was really paying attention to this project until this on the set photo of what people believe were supposed to be the seven dwarfs. Instead, they were turned into the seven magical creatures, which again, you know, according to the best information we have, was all because Peter Dinklage of Game of Thrones bitched about the idea of having seven dwarfs is horribly retrograde, which, by the way, a lot of other dwarf actors spoke out against him saying, well, you know, that's fine for you. You're rich now, right? You just took opportunities away from seven actors who have a very hard time getting cast in big projects like that. So reinforcing the idea, now, of course, Disney is saying this delay is because of the strike. Rumor has it they've already dumped $300 million into this thing. But it looks like they're reconceiving and reshooting this entire movie, because otherwise, why would they drop this photo on the day they announced the delay? Oh, look, the seven dwarfs, a terrifying bad CGI representation of the seven dwarfs, but the seven dwarfs nonetheless. So it doesn't really make any sense they would put that out there if this was not an enormous effort to try to rescue this movie from, I gotta say, I don't think I've ever seen a movie get such bad press a year before it's supposed to come out. Like this is potentially just the albatross around their neck that sinks this whole company.
So your theory is that South Park basically canceled Snow White.
Yes. My theory is South Park, it was the final straw. This episode was the final straw. Like, they were already starting, Iger was already saying to investors and in stockholder meetings that they're going to back off on the political battles and the cultural stuff. There's a hostile takeover possibly going to happen from an outside investor, Nelson Peltz. I always thought this was going to happen eventually. These companies can't just keep losing hundreds of millions of dollars making movies and TV shows that nobody wants to see. They have investors. Eventually, the ESG score is just not going to outweigh the collapse in their stock price and the collapse in their profitability. So it looks like we're here. It looks like Disney is raising the white flag, and it looks like South Park. That's why I compare it to what they did with Scientology. It looks like this South Park episode was the final shot that made them say, okay. We're going to bring back the dwarfs. Fine.
Even though they're not regularly on TV anymore, they still have a way of influencing the culture. I mean, South Park has really been a phenomenon. What, they started in 1996, so almost 30 years now.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Look, because I was looking to watch this episode. I wasn't sure if I was going to have to subscribe to Paramount Plus because I don't know what the deal is. HBO runs their regular episodes.
Right.
And Jesus Christ, that's like 26, 27 seasons.
It's
insane.
a ton of material. It's a ton of material. And most of it is really good. I mean, some of them, they had their peaks and valleys, you know, but
Sure.
most of it is quite good.
This was very smart and very nuanced, which is really Stone and Parker at their best. It was not just, oh, they tried to replace Indiana Jones with a diverse woman. Rah! It wasn't that. It was much more layered and textured and subtle than that. It definitely addressed how ridiculous it is that some people are obsessed with this subject in the,
Well,
in
it
the
sounds
midst
like
of an
right.
oligarchy,
Right? Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
like it definitely got into that, and it even actually did. I don't want to give away the entire episode or spoil the episode, but it even got into the idea that this was kind of an arms race, where first it was legitimately asshole, sexist, racist trolls bitching online about like an Asian woman in Star Wars, right?
Right.
And then they, on their end, doubled down. Oh, yeah? And it just kind of escalated like that. Now, personally, I don't agree with that. Because if you look at what they did with Star Wars in the first place, where they felt like they had to replace Luke Skywalker with a Mary Sue character, like even back then, they were not just making it more diverse. They were always pushing this very obnoxious, critical theory kind of a message. But just to point out, they didn't set out really to feed that. They set out to acknowledge it, but then they had a lot of different layers of their take on it. It wasn't just, Disney.
Well, yeah, it sounds to me like they did the whole, like they've done this before, where they will reverse a metaphor. Like they'll take a metaphor and they'll reverse it. Like we empowered the working people thinking they would help us, and now the working people are going into outer space, right? As opposed to empowering the rich.
Right.
They did a similar, one of their first episodes ever, was one of the first few seasons, where they lose all their money at the Native American casino,
I remember that.
and then the Native Americans start encroaching onto their land as payback, and they keep going, they keep encroaching onto their land. All right, so they just mix, they get like take a historical metaphor and just kind of flip it on its head.
That's exactly what they did here. Yeah.
Please clap.